Welcome to Rauta's opinion video. Today's topic is, what is metal music exactly? Now that might be a kind of a self-explanatory kind of a topic. The answer might be just resting just before your eyes, before your fingers and whatever. But this topic came to my mind as I was listening to one particular release coming later on this month, later for review as well, which was more or less mentioned by some people as kind of a black metal release. And now that I was actually listening to it a few times, it became clear to me, just after one listen, obviously, that it's not really metal release. But it was so goddamn close to actual metal release that it's made me kind of wonder, how do you actually define metal? Now, most people actually at this point probably think of, hey, it's called rock and roll, hard rock, whatever, I mean, because first of all, Metal Archive's the great database for all kind of metal bands and metal releases. I mean, they have their kind of a guidelines. How do you define metal? And I must say, it's mostly pretty good. I mean, it's kind of a given that Beatles is not exactly metal, whereas bands like Iron Maiden, they certainly are metal. Now it becomes more difficult when we put on table some of the bands that are a little bit this and that. I mean, would you consider Alice Cooper metal? Not likely. What about Mötley Crüe? What about bands like Wasp? So many hard rock bands actually are on the verge of being metal or rock, and it's not obviously always that clear. Now, Metal Archives is a little bit mistaken because probably rules changed during the years, that there are bands like Mortis, the Dungeons band, which never has been metal at all, and yet it's still mentioned on the website. Then again, there are not bands like Rammstein, which are, then again, clearly more or less metal, industrial or otherwise. But this is not about those kind of on the verge kind of bands, because I mean, they are more or less obvious to you, and when they are not, you can pretty much figure out when we're talking about rock and roll or heavy metal, or when we are talking about bands which are sometimes both. That is, on some albums they are more rock and roll and some are clearly metal. But what about bands that are being kind of advertised as metal band, yet have very, very few songs, if all, metal, that is, at all? I mentioned this topic, I think, the first time when I was doing my opinion video about Myrkur, the Danish beautiful actress, songwriter, vocalist person who had been praised in various metal medias as, the kind of a black metal sensation, which made me like vomit in my mouth. And also being very much a talent here and there with, extreme metal and whatever. Now, back then I obviously pretty much chewed the whole topic through, and to me it's kind of clear. She's not mostly playing metal. There are some metal tracks here and there, but that's it. So I'm not gonna touch so much the topic of Myrkur here. I mean, because that's already been talked over. And it's clear why some people just, praise her music. I mean, clearly she has nice vocals and all that stuff, but those are not exactly the people who are the core of black metal. But what about the bands that are called black metal? And this band, now that you were wondering what it is, Cherry, come on, let it out. What is the band you were talking about? I'm talking about Vesperith, a Finnish, more or less, one-woman project. Obviously, there are the other members as well, but driven by this one woman. Great album, by the way. You will see my review later on. But her album was mentioned somewhere like black metal, blah blah blah, and as such I was kind of expecting Finnish Myrkur, if you will. Now you will more understand my point later on, even deeper level than this video, when you're gonna check out her music or the review or both. But that made me wonder, like, how people actually figure out it's metal when you don't have distorted guitars, when you don't have bass, when you have keyboards, vocals, drums. Is that enough? Now, I remember also talking about this topic probably all over some 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, when I was doing an interview with a black metal band, when it was mentioned that kind of a certain type of music can be black metal, and when it has to be dark or cold, whatever. So there were lots of like topics mentioned which are not exactly music, that is related to instruments, but more about certain type of lyrics, mindset, ideology, philosophy, and so forth. But it was also mentioned, like, I mean, how much you can go away from metal and still being metal. That is, when you start removing certain components, elements, instruments, ideas, can you still be metal even though you're not exactly having metal instruments? And what is metal instrument in the first place? Now, we all know that guitar is being used in all kinds of various music, which is not all often metal. Distorted guitar, however, is very much in the core essence of metal music and also, well, rock music. Drums are even more available in different kind of music, so that is definitely not a definition of metal instrument. When it goes to blast beats, yes, certainly there is a metal relation, but then again, you can pretty much do even pop music with blast beat drums, which are, by the way, present in Vesperith album, and I think that's one of the things which made people confused. Is this extreme metal? Now, I think what lies in the core essence of metal music is definitely with guitars or bass. You can have metal band without guitars. There are a few. There are bands also without bass. So basically, you can have either ways, both or one of them. But if you remove both of them, I don't know how can it be metal. I mean, certainly you can have scream vocals and you can say that's pretty black metallic. You can have those fast beating drums like Vesperith album has. And you can have both. And then it kind of gets confusing. Can you just do black metal with scream vocals, add some keyboard layers akin to dark space, limbic art or whatever, blast beat drums, and then just, scream? It can sound pretty dark with keyboards, You can pretty much add kind of a cosmic level of music. And then when the drums are blasting, they can pretty much fool you, figuring out it's kind of a metal because it has everything else there except for the guitars and bass. But I mean, to me, it isn't metal music. Because once you start removing the kind of a most metallic sound there, that is usually the distorted guitar sound. We all know what I'm talking about, so don't be an ass. I think that's when it kind of gets removed. So of course you can pretty much synthesize the metal sound with keyboards. You can obviously have different synthetic elements. You can pretty much use different kind of samples. Take it from metal sounds. I mean, just banging a trash can cover which is made from metal, or you can have just some different kind of samples, I don't know, some kind of a distorted whatever sound, and make it sound kind of like metal. But I think that's just like being a wise ass about topic, because once you remove the stuff that are in the core essence of rock, which then again gave birth to metal, I think it ceases to be metal music. And like I said, I really liked Vesperith album. For once again, I'm pointing to my review. I still think that even though there are kind of metallic parts, or more like metal related parts, I don't think it's that much a metal release in any points. For example, most of the stuff doesn't exactly have the metal feeling. So while here and there you might have this and that which are very close, it's not. I'll try to explain this through a metaphor. Or I don't know if it's better called analog. But anyway, for example, when walking becomes running, once you can say, okay, it's jogging. For example, in sports, there are rules. When walking, you have to have either foot on the ground in order to make it count as walking. When you have at some points both feet off the ground, it's running. So it's kind of like black and white solution. You either walk or you run. There is no jogging, or, well, there certainly is, but jogging is running in terms. It's just slow running, but it's still running. So my point here is, once you start removing certain elements, once you go beyond the border, it becomes metal music. Or the other ways, if you go to different direction, it stops being metal. So once again, I'm kind of about trying to point here is that there are albums, there are music which are almost sounding like metal, but they are not. And to be honest, I don't really care what the genre is. If the music is good, if it sounds good, it is good. It doesn't matter if it's metal, pop, rap, jazz, salsa, whatever. I mean, it's good. But once again, I'm kind of like against false advertising. It's as much as trying to claim that Five Finger Death Punch is death metal. Of course, that makes me furious, and probably a lot of other people as well, because we like definitions. And when there are these genre warriors who say like, we don't need genres, who needs those definitions anyway? I don't know. Why don't you go to a library where everything is alphabetically ordered? I mean, when there are no genre boxes. If you want fiction, too bad, you gotta figure it out without those shelves and the labels that say, here lies fiction, here is children's books, and here is whatever else. I mean, we need those definitions. Without definitions, we don't have anything. If you can't figure out which one is a boat and which one is a car, they're just vehicles. We need those definitions. We need genres. So, to end my rant is, you need to have certain definition for metal. And before you start talking out of your ass, you need to have the kind of a basic level understanding what defines, be it metal, be it synth music or whatever, but you need to understand at least the very basics. And of course, this album was kind of an interesting one because it clearly made people confused. What is metal and what is not? Is murkur metal or is it not? For me, it's clear. If there is no single track which actually has these elements, then it's not. And even if there is like a couple of 2 metal tracks among 10 tracks which are not metal, it doesn't really count a metal album, does it not? Well, once again, feel free to disagree, feel free to challenge me, but put your points on the table and we shall start conversation or discussion under this very video in the comment box below. Thank you for watching, thank you for commenting, see you soon with more Rauta stuff coming your way.